They gave us one warning. We gave them none. Drops the listener in immediately with a contrast that demands an explanation. They gave us one warning. We gave them none. That's the difference between us and every other species in this galaxy. They warn first. We don't warn at all. We just show up. And by the time they understand what that means, it's already over. The Galactic Union had been watching us for 200 years. Not closely, not with any real concern. Just the way you keep an eye on something small and harmless in the corner of a room. Out of habit, mostly, they had a file on us. Every species in the Union had a file. Ours was thin, 4 pages, maybe 5. The summary read, Species 441, C. Third planet, Sol System. Carbon-based, oxygen-breathing. Technologically developing. Threat level negligible. Recommended status, passive observation only. Negligible. That was their word for us. They filed it. They moved on. They forgot about us for 40 years. The next time they looked at that file, they added one word to the threat level. They changed it from negligible to unknown. That one change kept their analysts awake for a very long time. The Union had 1,700 member worlds, 1,700 species, each with their own history, their own culture, their own way of seeing the galaxy. But they shared one thing, one deep, foundational belief that held the whole Union together. Stability. That was the word they lived by. Everything the Union did, every law, every policy, every decision, was built around one goal: keep things stable. Don't let anything upset the balance. Don't let anything grow too fast, change too much, reach too far. Because in a galaxy this old, this complex, this fragile in ways most species didn't fully understand, stability was everything. And humanity was not stable. We had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We had almost destroyed our own planet 3 times. We had never, in all of recorded history, gone more than 40 years without some major conflicts somewhere on our world. By the Union's models, we were 1 generation away from extinction, not because of them, because of ourselves. They were probably right, for a while, but then something happened that their models didn't account for. We stopped, not fighting, not completely, but we stopped going backward. We stopped letting the worst of ourselves win. Not all at once, not cleanly, not without cost, but we stopped, and we started building. The Union's analysts flagged it immediately. They updated the file. One word changed, negligible to unknown, and unknown scared them far more than dangerous ever had. The decision was made in a room that no human had ever seen. A council chamber on the Union's capital world. 31 senior members. Species that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Species that had seen civilizations rise and fall and knew, better than anyone, what the signs looked like. They looked at the data on humanity. The rate of our technological growth. The rate of our social change. The speed at which we were approaching interstellar capability. One of them, a Velhari elder named Sorenvel, who had served on this council for 800 years, said something that ended the debate before it really started. She said, "In 300 years they will be here, at this table, or they will be at our door. There is no third option with the species." The room was quiet for a long time. Then someone asked, "Which would you prefer?" Sorenvel looked at the data one more time. "Neither," she said. "I would prefer they never arrive." The vote was 23-8. The order was given. What they sent was elegant. That's what made it so terrible. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a signal, one invisible pulse of energy, aimed at Earth's upper atmosphere. Harmless to biology, harmless to buildings, harmless to almost everything, except electronics. In the space of 6 hours, every satellite went dark. Every network died. Every computer on the planet wiped to nothing. Every system that kept the modern world running, power grids, hospitals, water treatment, communication, gone, not destroyed, erased, like it had never existed. The Union's analysts estimated the collapse would follow within 18 months, maybe 2 years for the most resilient regions, but collapse was certain. A civilization that depended on its own systems, stripped of those systems overnight. There was only one way that ended. They filed their post-action report. They marked humanity's file. Contained. Monitor for 12 months, then close. They didn't wait 12 months. They closed it in 3. The early data looked exactly like what they expected. Chaos. Breakdown. Civilizational stress fractures. They closed the file. They turned off the monitors. They moved on. They didn't look back. That was their mistake. The only one they needed to make. Here's what actually happened. Yes, the first 72 hours were chaos. That part the Union got right. Cities without power. Hospitals running on generators that would last days, not weeks. Governments unable to communicate. Supply chains broken overnight. Billions of people facing the sudden, terrifying reality of a world that had lost its nervous system. Panic, fear, confusion. All of that was real. But here is what the Union's models didn't predict. What came after the panic? It came quietly, without announcement, without leadership from above, because the leadership from above was just as lost as everyone else. It came from the bottom, from the ground, from people who had nothing left to wait for. So they stopped waiting. A nurse in Lagos who walked out of her darkened hospital and started treating people on the street with whatever supplies she could carry. An engineer in Sao Paulo who figured out, in the first week, how to get a neighborhood's water running again using hand pumps from a hardware store. A retired military officer in rural Canada who started a radio network using equipment he'd built as a hobby and didn't know yet that would eventually connect 3 continents. None of them were extraordinary people. That's the point. That's what the Union never understood. They were ordinary people doing what ordinary people do when there is no one left to wait for. They improvise. They help. They build. And they don't stop. Within 6 months, the networks had grown from neighborhoods to cities. Within a year, from cities to regions. Within 2 years, the point at which the Union's model said collapse was certain. The networks were continental. And something had begun to happen that had never happened in all of human history. We were cooperating. Not perfectly. Not without conflict. Not in ways that would have impressed anyone looking for a smooth, clean story of human unity. But cooperating. Across borders that had existed for centuries. Across language gaps and cultural differences and ancient rivalries. Because when you take away everything except the essentials, it turns out that the essentials don't care about borders. The Union's closed file sat in an archive, gathering dust. No one was looking at it. 40 years passed. A junior analyst named Catherine was new to the Union's observation division, fresh out of training, eager, slightly too curious for her superior's comfort. She had a habit of going through old closed files and asking whether the closure was still valid. Most of the time it was. Most of the time. She pulled up file 441. See, on a slow afternoon with nothing urgent on her desk. She started with the post-action report. Standard, expected, confident in its conclusions. Then she pulled the passive sensor data from the Sol system. The data the monitoring buoys were still quietly collecting, even with the file closed, because the buoys ran automatically and no one had thought to turn them off. She looked at the data. She looked at it for a long time. Then she pulled up a comparison. The expected decay curve for a civilization after containment action. The line that, in every previous case, bent downward. She put it next to humanity's actual data. The lines didn't match. At all. She sat with this for 2 days before she told anyone. Not because she was afraid. Because she wanted to be certain. She ran the analysis 6 times. Different methods. Different variables. Same result every time. Humanity was not decaying. Humanity was growing. Faster than before the containment action. Much faster. She filed an urgent report. She flagged it priority 1. She included a line at the end that her supervisor would later describe as the most alarming thing he had read in 2 centuries of service. The line said, based on current trajectory, Species 441, C will achieve basic interstellar capability in approximately 40 years. I recommend immediate reevaluation of the 441C file. I also recommend we consider the possibility that the containment action did not weaken this species. It made them stronger. The council met again. The same chamber. Not the same faces. Most of the original 31 were gone. But the same chamber, the same weight of history, the same instinct toward stability. Cale Thrin presented her findings. She was 26 years old. She was presenting to beings who had been alive for centuries. She didn't flinch. When she finished, Sorenvel's successor, an elder named Thales Dren, who had the same role, the same title, and it turned out the same way of ending arguments, said, "In 40 years they will be here, at this table, or they will be at our door." We have heard these words before. The room was quiet. Someone said, "Then we act again." Another containment action. A stronger one this time. Thales Dren looked at the proposal. Then she looked at Cale Thrin. "You disagree," she said. It wasn't a question. Cale Thrin said, "The first action set them back 20 years, maybe 30, and they came back stronger. A second action will set them back again, and they will come back stronger still. We will do this forever. Or," she paused, "we stop. And if we stop," someone said, "and they arrive angry?" Cale Thrin looked at the data on her screen. "They are going to arrive angry regardless," she said. "The question is whether they arrive angry and alone, or angry and ready, because if we keep doing this to them, by the time they get here, they will have had 100 years to prepare for us, 100 years to build, to plan, 100 years of knowing that someone out there is trying to stop them. Do we want that version of humanity at our door?" The room was very quiet. Thales Dren looked at the proposal for a second action. Then she put it down. "What do you recommend?" she said. Cale Thrin took a breath. "Contact," she said. "Honest contact. Tell them what we did, why we did it. Let them decide what comes next. Because one way or another, they are going to be at this table. The only question is whether they come in as partners or as something else." The vote was 12 to 19, against her recommendation, in favor of a second action. Cale Thrin walked out of the chamber. She sat in the corridor for a long time. Then she did something that had never been done in the history of the Union's observation division. She sent a warning to Earth on a frequency she knew the Union wasn't monitoring, using an old code that no one had used in decades. One message, short, simple. "They are coming again. You have 6 months. I am sorry for what was done to you. I am trying to stop what comes next. I don't know if I'll succeed, but you deserve to know." She signed it with her name. Then she sat back, and she waited to see what humans did with 6 months. What humans did with 6 months was extraordinary, not because of what they built. They didn't have time to build anything truly new, but because of what they decided. The message had been received by a communications specialist named Dr. Jiwon Park, running a deep space monitoring station in the highlands of New Zealand. He had decoded it in 4 hours. He had verified it in 12. He had then done something that 2 generations earlier might not have been possible. He shared it, not with one government, not with one organization, with everyone, the whole network, the same network that had been built from the ground up after the first pulse, the same network that had connected the nurse in Lagos to the engineer in Sao Paulo to the radio operator in Canada. That network now covered the planet. It reached into orbit where humanity had returned, quietly, carefully, on ships that looked nothing like the elegant spacecraft of old dreams but worked perfectly well. It reached to the small, rough station on the edge of lunar orbit where the first permanent crew had been living for 11 years. The message went everywhere at once. And for the first time in human history, the planet held a real conversation. A messy, complicated, multilingual, often heated, entirely genuine conversation about what to do, not what one government decided, not what the most powerful nation chose, what humanity, collectively as a species, decided together. It took 3 weeks. It was not unanimous. It was never going to be unanimous. But it was clear they sent a response. Not on a military frequency, not on a diplomatic channel, on the same frequency Cale Thrin had used, because they understood something important. The person who had warned them was already taking a risk. They were not going to make that risk harder. The response was written by a woman named Dr. Amara Solis. She had been 12 years old during the first pulse. She was 53 now, a physicist, a council member on the planetary coordination body. She had spent 40 years wondering what had really happened that day. Now she knew. She wrote, "We receive your message. We understand what is coming. We want you to know that we do not blame you for what was done to us. We know you did not give the order. We know you tried to stop the next one. That means something. That means more than you know. We are not afraid of what is coming. We have been through worse. We built ourselves back once. We will do it again if we have to. But we would prefer not to. We would prefer to have this conversation properly. All of us, face to face. In whatever room you use for decisions is big. We are ready for that conversation. We have been ready for a long time. We were just never invited. We are inviting ourselves now. We will be there in 90 days, not as a threat, as a presence, as a people who exist and intend to keep existing, and would very much like to talk about what that means for everyone involved. We hope you will be there too." The message was signed, on behalf of Earth, on behalf of humanity, Dr. Amara Solis, and beneath it, 347 million individual signatures. Every person on the network, every voice that had chosen to add their name, 347 million signatures, sent to a single alien analyst sitting in a corridor outside a council chamber. Kale Thrin opened the message. She read the signatures for a long time. Not all of them. There were too many, but she scrolled through them, slowly, name after name after name, from every country, every language, every corner of a planet that had been set back and cut off and told it was contained, still here, still reaching, still signing their names to something that meant, we are real, we exist, we matter. She closed her eyes. Then she stood up. She walked back into the council chamber. She placed her data tablet on the table in front of Thales Dren. She said, "Before you send the second action, you should see this." Thales Dren looked at the screen. She looked at the signatures for a long time. Then she looked at the message. She read it twice. When she was done, she set the tablet down. She looked at the proposal for a second containment action. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she pushed it aside. "Cancel the action," she said. "Send a delegation to the Sol system. Formal, full diplomatic status. And," she paused, "extend an invitation. To the council. As guests." Someone said, "As members?" She looked at the signatures again. "As members," she said. "The Union delegation arrived at Earth on a Thursday morning, which is, honestly, the second most human thing about this whole story. The beginning of everything new, starting on a Thursday. 7 ships, large, elegant, ancient in the way that 11,000-year-old civilizations make things. They entered orbit above a planet that was not what they expected, not the recovering, struggling world their old files described. A world alive with activity, with networks and stations and ships of its own. Rough, practical ships that didn't look impressive until you understood what they'd been built with and how long it had taken. Less than a century. Starting from nothing, the delegation leader, a senior diplomat named Oralthane, looked at the sensor data and was very quiet for a very long time. His communications officer said, "Sir, they're hailing us." "Put it through," he said. A face appeared on the screen. Dr. Amara Solis, 53 years old. Calm in the way of someone who has been waiting for a long time and is not going to waste a moment by being anything other than exactly herself. "Welcome," she said. "We've been expecting you." Oralthane looked at her. He had been a diplomat for 400 years. He had made first contact with 16 species. He had never felt, in any of those moments, anything quite like this. "The pleasure is ours," he said. He meant it. He looked at her for a moment more. "I have read your file," he said. "The original one. For pages. It called you Negligible." Amara looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I know." A pause. "We've had some time to prove otherwise." He almost smiled. "Indeed you have, Dr. Solis. Indeed you have." The formal session was held a week later, in the council hall on Voron Prime, the same hall that had held the vote to silence humanity. For the first time in its history, it held something different, a human delegation. 12 people chosen by the network, not the most powerful, not the most famous, the most trusted people who've been doing the work, quietly for decades, people who understood what was at stake. Amara led them in. The hall was full. 50,000 beings from 1,700 worlds, all watching, all silent. Amara walked to the center. She stood there for a moment. She looked up at the scale of it, the ancient architecture, the faces looking down from every level, the weight of 11,000 years of history pressing down from every surface. She took one breath. Then she spoke. "We are here," she said, "not because you invited us first, not because you welcomed us, not because anyone gave us permission. We are here because we exist, because we survived what was done to us, because we build ourselves back, not once but twice, and we will do it a third time if we have to and a fourth, and as many times as it takes. Not out of stubbornness, out of something simpler. We are here because we refuse to accept that the story ends before it's supposed to. We are not asking for apologies. We are not asking for sympathy. We are not asking for anything that needs to be given. We are here to participate in this conversation, in this galaxy, in whatever comes next, because it is ours too. It always was. The file had it wrong from the beginning. We were never negligible. No one ever is." She stopped. The hall was absolutely silent. Then something happened that had never happened in that chamber. Not in 11,000 years. Not once. Someone started clapping. Not applause in the way humans mean it. The fairy made a sound with their hands, a deep rhythmic beat, almost like a drum. Then the species beside them joined. Then another, and another, until the sound filled the hall from the floor to the ceiling. 50,000 voices, or their equivalent, all saying the same thing. "We hear you. We see you. Welcome." 3 months later, humanity became the 704th member of the Galactic Union. Not the strongest member, not the oldest, not the most powerful, the newest, the youngest, the one who had been set back twice and arrived anyway. There was a formal ceremony. Protocols going back to the Union's founding. Ancient traditions carried out exactly as they had been for 11,000 years. And then, because no one had thought to tell them not to, the human delegation added something at the end. A song. Just one. A song that had been written 2 years after the first pulse. In a language that didn't have a country anymore, but still had people who loved it. A song about going on. About surviving the impossible. About the thing inside a person that doesn't know how to stop. The entire delegation sang it together. Badly, mostly. Off-key in at least 3 places. But together, the Union members watched. Some were confused. Some were moved in ways they didn't have words for. Oralthane, sitting in the first row, watched and thought about the 4-page file, about the word negligible. He thought about how the most catastrophic failures in all of history weren't the ones made out of malice. They were the ones made out of underestimation, out of looking at something extraordinary and seeing only the surface, out of measuring a civilization by what it looked like in the moment instead of what it was reaching for. He thought about the 347 million signatures. He thought, we almost took this from the galaxy. We almost took them from themselves. Not because we were cruel, because we were afraid of what we didn't understand. And that is, perhaps, the oldest and most human mistake in the universe. Not just human. Everyone's. All of us. He watched them sing, and he was glad. He was genuinely, profoundly glad that someone somewhere had been watching closely enough to see what the models missed, and that 347 million people had been brave enough to sign their names to something that said, "We are here. We matter. We're not done yet." The galaxy never made that mistake again. Not with humanity. Not with anyone. Because humanity, once they had a seat at the table, turned out to be very good at one thing the Union had never really prioritized. Asking questions. The uncomfortable ones. The ones that made old systems justify themselves. The ones that started with, but why? Why does it have to be this way? Why has it always been done like this? Why does unknown have to mean dangerous? Why does different have to mean threat? And the Union, to its credit, started answering, slowly, imperfectly, not always honestly, not all at once, but answering. Because that's what happens when you let someone in who hasn't been told yet that some questions aren't supposed to be asked. They asked them, and sometimes the answer changes everything. They gave us one warning. We built it into the foundation of something new. We gave them no warning. We just showed up. 347 million signatures. One song, badly sung, entirely meant. That's the difference between us and every other species in this galaxy. Not power, not technology, not history. We show up. We sign our names. We sing off-key in the most important room in the galaxy. And we refuse, with everything we have, to believe that the story is over before we've finished telling it. Because here's the truth about humanity. The truth that 11,000 years of Union records couldn't capture. That 4 pages of analysis couldn't hold. That no probability model ever built has been able to measure. We are not remarkable because we're strong. We are remarkable because we don't know when to stop. And in a galaxy full of ancient, powerful, stable, measured civilizations, that is the rarest thing of all. The one thing nobody planned for. The one variable that breaks every model. The one force that no containment action has ever contained. Hope, not the fragile kind. Not the kind that needs a reason. The stubborn kind. The kind that exists because it exists. The kind that says, this is not the end. This is never the end. We are just getting started. And the galaxy is starting to believe it.